Yo, people, lateness is greatness. Welcome back into the building. You already know what time it is. It's time for the Chelsea versus Aston Villa review. And listen, it's very rare that I do a review this late because obviously the game felt like a lifetime ago for many of you. But of course, I was on other commitments, as were the boys as well with their, writing, which we're going to speak about as well with the Football London. They're smashing it at the moment. So we're used to, I think all of us are kind of used to, especially Daniel on YouTube is used to going, quite immediately after, but it wasn't possible. So we're kind of all sitting in the same boat, but I think we've all had that time to reflect and look back on what was quite an incredible game in terms of the way that it went. 3-0, the scoreline looks comfortable. It looks easy. It looks almost, romantic on a Lukaku comeback, 2 goals, but it just simply wasn't that, in the first half. So before we get into all that, I'll start with Daniel, bro. Welcome back. And obviously, how are you, man?
I'm doing really well, Matisse. I think the last time I was on this channel was maybe before the Champions League final. I think it may have been the Leicester review, the 2-1 against Leicester before the...
With Monster, maybe, was it?
No, I think it was just like an instant reaction.
It was,
to the game, that 2-1 victory. And I was on. So obviously it's been a mental few months, obviously for Chelsea, and personally it's been quite intense the last few weeks for both me and Jay. So it's great to be back on, and always amazing to be able to speak about a Chelsea win. And I remember the last time we were on, I spoke about Lukaku and why I wanted us to sign Lukaku. So that also makes it equally poetic returning now.
100%. And Jay, bro, welcome back. I think it's the second time on. Obviously, we've done the byline a few times as well together. Welcome back. And I mean, how are you and how are you feeling? Because that result yesterday was just incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was nice. It was good. I suggested in a like a preview that Daniel and I wrote together alongside maybe Adam Newson as well, who I know has been on the channel, that Aston Villa are one of the Premier League banana skins this season. If they're teams that you have to beat comfortably in order to state your intentions quite quickly. And, we will go into it. The first half wasn't great, but the second half was much better. But when you have someone like Lukaku, who I'm sure we'll speak about in depth, it's almost problem solved, isn't it? And you can just see how the team has grown in confidence. And it was really good. Obviously, Daniel and I worked until 11 last night doing coverage and stuff for the game. But, it's the same as you, man. Like we love talking about it, so it's not really too much hassle. But how are you? Because you're close to 20,000 subs. I'm seeing it close to 80k Twitter.
Yeah, I mean it's been good, man. I mean this season has obviously just brought new things. Obviously yesterday I was on Don Robbie for the first time, which was really fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the watch along with Pippa and Eddie as well. I mean it was a good game to watch because, I didn't get the channel demonetized, which was my main goal going into it. I didn't want to flip out and do a madness. We won. And, obviously the Big Six and the Byline, and there's so many things going on. So I'm just really just happy with it all at the moment. Right now, as I said to you backstage, man, Twitter, it's just like, I took a lovely break from that over the international break. I put the break in international break, as they say. I know Daniel's done it a few times in terms of taking a break off Twitter. It is so detox. It's beautiful. It's like a detox. It is. Honestly, I was actually quite surprised of how much I enjoyed the break. Just not going on there and not seeing the Drogba international slander, as you will, which is almost repetitive at this point. So I had a great time, and it's good to be back because listen, this club football for me is just another level to the international football, and we have to get straight into it because that first half, I mean, we was just a bit disjointed. I want to get your reactions really, first of all, to the starting 11, because when I seen it go out, obviously the first thing that popped into my head was fantastic and kind of bold from Thomas Tuchel to play Trevor Chalobah and Hudson-Odoi on the same flank together. He's usually, in my head, going to pair Trevor up with an Azpilicueta and make sure that he's well looked after. And obviously defensively, he's got that cover, but he went a little bit bold, maybe because, I don't know, he guessed or second guessed that Aston Villa were going to match him with the formation. I'm not sure. But when you seen the reaction of when you saw the Trevor Chalobah on the starting 11, Daniel, how did you feel? Because it's well deserved, isn't it, after the first 2 performances he put in?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't surprised specifically to see Trevor in the team. The moment Reece James was suspended, I kind of actually thought that Trevor would be in before Callum, actually. If there was going to be sort of any change to the team that started against Liverpool, I thought that Chalobah would come in. just looking at his performance last night, you know, he won 77% of his duels, made 4 tackles and 6 clearances, the most in each category for a Chelsea player. He started now both Chelsea Premier League games at home, and he's looked so composed and cool. And the most shocking thing generally about that lineup for me was that it's the first time Tuchel has fielded a Premier League Chelsea 11 without at least one of Cesar Azpilicueta, Jorginho, and Mason Mount. They are 3 players who, in 3 areas of the team, who are just trusted players, you know, regulars, continuity. And I was a little bit concerned as the first half went on, and as I'm sure we'll get into, not having those players, at least one of them, because they're just such, there's such a regularity in the team. Like, you expect them to be there in terms of their leadership, in terms of their quality, what they mean in their areas of the pitch. And I think maybe you saw some of that disorganization or lack of fluidity in that first half. But Trevor, as the game went on, individually, I thought was brilliant. You know, he's so composed, and across that back line, I think you're seeing that we didn't really need Jules Koundé. And it was something I said consistently, and I'm not, you know, having a go at Jules Koundé, because I'm sure there'll be people watching who are big fans of him, but it just, for me, was never really a priority position for us. And it's great to see that Trevor, with Zuma leaving, is going to have at least till January a chance to really put his name out there, and he's doing it so far and performing so comfortably.
Yeah, no, I echo that, because it wasn't a priority. As much as Jules Koundé would have been, you know, a great addition, because obviously he's a very talented young player, in terms of getting your priorities straight, the midfield was so critical, and I think Tuchel spoke on that as well. I mean, Jay, what did you make of those matchups? Because they are a little bit unorthodox in terms of the pairings, and maybe there's a lack of chemistry, and maybe that is the reason as to why we got such a disjointed first half. I mean, what did you make of just some of those performances in the first half? Do you think it was complacency, international break, lack of fitness?
Well, I think, yeah, probably a mix of all of it. On the Trevor Callum sort of duopoly on the right hand side, you know, I think that's really good man management. Personally, what Tuchel's done is he said to these boys, right, you can play, and he says it in a way where he's not even questioning his decision. So that instantly gives them confidence, and they can play around players like Romelu Lukaku, who's just on top form. And so for Chalobah, that's excellent, because his right to start has not been questioned, and Callum obviously getting minutes. It's not in the place you'd like to see him play. You want to see him on the left wing, really, but he's getting minutes regardless. So that was fine. Obviously, the Sal Kovacic midfield duo was obviously not successful. And I think people have been far too quick to criticize Saul in that sense. Yeah. It will take time. He is a 4th choice midfielder. He has won the league of Atletico Madrid and been a big player there, but he has been brought in as 4th choice until he earns the right to be anything other than that. So you have to give him time. You know, Daniel and I were equating it to our own situations, and we were talking about it before. Like, when you start a new job or when you do something, it takes a while to bed in and understand. And if you can imagine that, where the pressure is 1,000 times more in a country where you don't know the language, and in a team that is expecting results instantly, it's not always easy. So, you know, they obviously got overrun. I think I said this on the podcast and I recorded this morning. I genuinely believe Dean Smith is the best English manager in the world at the moment. And he set his team up to be very physical, to really get amongst it, and to play that game that I said was quite vintage Barclays in a way. Is get very physical, get amongst it, get tight to your man, and try and break them down, because we know that Chelsea, sometimes the weakness can be the soft core, because everywhere else is pretty impenetrable now. So, you know, it's more credit to Aston Villa for playing well, and Chelsea just trying to click back into gear. But, you know, things eventually got sorted, and like I've said, when you have Lukaku that has 2 touches but scores 2 goals, it's job done by that point.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't really on socials during the game, which was kind of refreshing, obviously just focused on the watch along, but I was quite surprised to see, even on the watch along, and people that saw me would have noticed, I was quite surprised to see the backlash that Saul Niguez was getting. Obviously it wasn't a good performance on his behalf. It was a lot of turnovers. He gave the ball away. He wasn't at the tempo that you need to be. It felt like he thought he had a lot more time and space than he did. And that's quite common for players that come to the Premier League. They don't actually understand or are ready for the tempo that they're walking into, because the tempo is ridiculous. Especially, I mean, if this was maybe Newcastle at home or Burnley at home, a team that are going to sit back and allow you time on the ball, that would have been maybe an easier fixture to get himself warmed up into. But an Aston Villa who are playing 2 up front and are being, you know, quite aggressive and pressing from the front, you know, that's always going to be quite a tall task for him. But we have to give him time. I mean, I've seen a few people in the comments, echo that as well. You have to give him time. This is a guy that really hasn't been outside the Atletico Madrid chamber his whole career. I said it on the byline that, it's kind of weird him even being here, in a good way for him, obviously, because it's a change of scenery. But he's been under Diego Simeone his whole life, his whole career. And to see him in another team is weird in itself, let alone a new league. So he's going to take time to get used to it. I don't think he would have started if Jorginho hadn't accumulated so many minutes as well. And obviously Kante being out. And I feel like Tuchel was kind of almost forced to start him, and instead of easing him in how he would probably want to, bring him off the bench, get him 10, 15 minutes, get him going like that. If he'd come on with 10, 15 minutes to go with a 3-0, everybody would have been talking about a different probably performance from Saul, where he comes on and he's fine. But yeah, he obviously was displaced a few times. And I think in terms of Kova next to him, I think that's why I couldn't really give Kova the man the match in the end, is because he was his partner. And it's obviously teamwork. Now, a lot of people will say he was kind of left for dead in that midfield in terms of, the guy, just the amount of space that was created in between the defense and the midfield in that first half. They just, in transition, every single time, they were just like a knife through butter down the middle. And it was almost becoming ridiculous how many times we was allowing clear-cut chances where Mendy had to bail us out. But it just, the matchup just didn't work, as you said. On to Hudson-Odoi, because I think him and Trevor are in different situations. And it's weird because Trevor's obviously 22 years old and he's actually in that Mason Mount, Pulisic age bracket. But obviously this is his first season in the first team, so it's not really the same situation as it is for Hudson-Odoi, who, for me, it feels like if he doesn't have a great game or a masterclass, he hasn't taken his opportunity. And it's harsh because he's so young, but because he's got so much competition around him, he really can't afford to just have an okay game, which is what I felt he had. I mean, Daniel, how do you look at it for him in terms of not only him playing right wing back, and obviously a lot of people want to play wing, but just in terms of maybe the pressure that he might be under to overexert himself in these games?
Well, I mean, this is the problem, right? Is that, Callum before this game had no Premier League minutes in the first 3 games. Emerson had more Premier League minutes than Hudson-Odoi in the first 3 Premier League games, and now he's at Lyon, isn't he, on loan? There is an expectation on Hudson-Odoi. It's the paradox he finds himself in at Chelsea, and why I sort of came to the conclusion in the remaining days of the transfer window that I felt like a loan was best for him, because just prioritising his own development and the opportunity to go to Borussia Dortmund. It's a shame with Callum because he's stuck in this cycle at Chelsea where he needs time to develop, to become the player many people feel he can be, but he isn't getting that time because of the pressure and the competitiveness around him and the expectation at Chelsea for instant results. So he's constantly in this cycle of, if he doesn't perform in 11, 12 out of 10, when he plays in an unfavored role, to be honest, that isn't his best position, people question, well, what's the hype around? Well, if he doesn't get that opportunity and running the team, then I don't think you're ever going to see that player that you want to. So that's my nagging frustration with Callum is I do concern for his development this year. I think this year he really needs to step up in terms of like the minutes he's getting on the pitch. I wrote an article, one of my first articles for Football London was looking at his pre-season, his prospect for this year, and finding out that, like, I think last season specifically in the Premier League, he was about 2,000 minutes, I think, behind Bukayo Saka. I think that's just on last season. It may be more than that. And Mason Greenwood, he's buying. So trying to compare him with similar young English talent. And that's concerning. That's where Callum needs to grow. So his performance, I would have liked to have seen him get up the pitch a bit more, in that right wing role. In that right wing back role, he's kind of become a right winger. You expect in that, when Tuchel fields him in that role, Chelsea can have a lot more dominance, superiority, and he can play up there and push up. But, Aston Villa with their press never really allowed Chelsea to have that superiority where we could get both wing backs really pressed up the pitch enough to really dominate and really put our mark on there. And that's where Callum can really thrive. And he hasn't been able to really to put his mark on the game. I just see that comment there that, for me, I think Tuchel has to justify why he's kept Callum around, to me. Bringing in Sal, there's another body there. Sal has played at wing back before. I know he's had a very difficult opening game, but, there's bodies there to fill in at times. And if you're going to keep Callum around, then for me, he has to play, or at least he needs to play substantial minutes to justify keeping him around. I don't quite know for Callum how it's going to benefit his career if he just is a sporadic player that plays once every 5 or 6 games. He's, as I say, for Chelsea and for Tuchel, it's club versus player needs. For Chelsea and Tuchel, I understand why they want Hudson-Odoi around, not only for the quality, but just having another body to fill in several roles. But for player, I don't think it's a good situation. So it's a shame for Callum, it really is. And I think Jay probably, shares sort of my frustration.
Bro, I said sell him.
Sell him? Oh, wow. What, with a buyback or something like that with the rest of them?
I don't even mind. I thought we should have sold him to Bayern when they put in the big offer, to be honest. Like, I just thought it was quite clear that he maybe wasn't going to develop the way that we all wanted him to. And Daniel and I touched on this quite a lot. It's like, the player's development is more important than our club loyalties. Unfortunately, you have to put the person first, and that's sort of the way that football's changing. And Callum is not going to develop into the player we think he can be at Chelsea. I think that's so clearly obvious right now. It's not going to happen. So a move away is almost a must for his own development. He wants to play off the left. He's not going to, because you're going to play Kai Havertz there, and Timo Werner's going to start over him as well. And even at that point, you've got Pulisic, who's probably going to play. And then if Chelsea switch up and they go for sort of a 2 up top with 1 in behind, Callum's not going to be one of those either, because Ziyech will be the 10 and then it'll be like Kai or Timo alongside Lukaku in that way. And Callum, like Daniel said, getting minutes is the most important thing, but also getting minutes in your preferred position at this point in your career is fundamental. And if he's not going to go out on loan, then we should have accepted things a while ago. And I just think it's poor forward planning, really, in how Callum's been dealt with, because, you can't anticipate a major injury. I hear that. You can't anticipate things like COVID or any sort of media allegations that came out over the last sort of 18 months. But what you can do is you can say, if we bring in these players, is the path for Callum really that clear? No. Okay, so let's accept 70 million from Bayern Munich, because even someone like Callum Hudson-Odoi, who could reach his peak, wouldn't fetch more than 70 million. I mean, you just saw Sancho get bought for around there, and Sancho is so far ahead in his development in comparison to Callum. Like, are you ever going to get that much again? And obviously, people don't want the Salah, not Lukaku now, but the Kevin De Bruyne thing to come back. But you can't be scared of future eventualities. And also, Chelsea expect instant results in a way, so it doesn't really work in any sense right now. And I feel very, very sad for Callum, because he's a player that deserves to be playing in his preferred position week in, week out at a high level. He's definitely a Europa League, Champions League player at the moment. He'll definitely develop, if he's allowed, into a Champions League level player consistently. But it's not happening at Chelsea, and I literally don't know why he's not allowed to go somewhere, because it's just not helpful for him.
Yeah, his stats, can I just say this quickly? His stats last year were really impressive. Like, some of the key passes in the final third. I remember one particular stat I picked out where key passes, he was up there with the likes of Bruno Fernandes, Jack Grealish, and Kevin De Bruyne. And this is a guy who hasn't been playing regularly for Chelsea.
His passing is his most underrated thing, though. Like, his most underrated attribute is his passing. He's an incredible passer.
Yeah, brilliant switch of play. Really good crosser of the ball as well. I think his shooting, there's a few things I want to say on Callum. I think his shooting from the left wing is not as tight as it needs to be in terms of finding the corners, the power, and that's what potentially does limit him, because I know in the modern game especially, and we know he's not that Mohamed Salah, Mane type, winger. He's more of a creative winger, and there is a difference between that, the goal scoring and the creative wingers. But I think in the modern game, you do need to fetch a few amount of goals from that side. And he showed it at times, with the offside goal against Bayern Munich, and maybe the goal against Rennes as well in the Champions League, where he runs in behind Mason Mount, finds him. But you need that on a bit more regularity if you're going to play left wing. But I must say, the last few weeks, I think this is the most I've been worried with Callum since he's been at Chelsea, I think, because when it comes to Tuchel, he's always had, and I've always pushed this, he's always had these mannerisms and these emotional, connection and tactical, instructions that he's feeding them after the games, and he looks so invested. It's like a crypto coin. The guy is like all in, do you know what I mean? And then it's tanked. The coin is tanking.
Yeah.
I can see it dipping, and everyone's like, buy the dip. I'm like, I don't know if it's coming back up, bro.
Could I just say this, Matisse? Someone who I really respect and I have great conversations with, Ollie Glanville on Twitter. He says there's a discrepancy between what Tuchel says in public and what he actually does with Callum Hudson-Odoi, and that's true. I know it's not very popular now to allude to any way of criticizing Tuchel, because he's doing an amazing job at Chelsea, but just individually on the case of Callum Hudson-Odoi, it's all right giving him these pats in and looking like, you're a real big fan of him in public. But, Callum has played games where he's been very, very good, and then he's out the team. I remember him playing specifically left wing against Everton last season.
Yeah.
And then a couple of days later, he was out the team.
And he played really well that game in the 2-0.
He played really well in the Etihad when he came off the bench at right wing. His pass basically creates the space for the winner. Timo Werner cutting it back to Marcos Alonso, but then he's not starting the next game.
Yeah,
and that's where, like, for me, I just come to the conclusion that, especially with the tone of Tuchel's comments pre the international break about Callum, the way he's constantly supported Timo Werner throughout difficult periods, and the way he speaks about Callum in kind of, it sounds dramatic, but kind of a more brutal way, just makes me feel like, for Callum's own sake, he's not going to get played in his regular position.
Yeah.
Even if he does and he plays well, there's a high probability with the competitive nature of this squad, he's out the team within a couple of days. And Dortmund, I mean, is there a better place in European football for young attacking talent to go and develop? I mean,
I do not want him to go to Dortmund. I'm going to throw out another
really?
sort
Why
of...
is that?
I
my
honestly
eyes
don't...
lit up when I seen Dortmund. Lit up.
I don't think Dortmund, because I think that Callum is going to be such a victim of crushing standards. And all that will happen is, if he goes to Dortmund, it'll be, can he do what Sancho does? And if he doesn't do exactly what Sancho did or better, there's going to be harsh criticism. And clearly, as is the same with most players, Callum does need an arm around the shoulder sometimes. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that criticism actually does get to him, perhaps more so than other players. Not as much as it does, say, Timo or Kepa. But, criticism obviously gets to him. He can be a sensitive guy in that sense, and that's totally understandable. But if he goes to Dortmund, there's going to be a weight of expectation that he replicates what other players have done there. And if he doesn't do that, people are going to completely write him off. He needs to go to a team that hasn't had a Sancho, but could do with a Sancho, or could provide the foundations for a Sancho, if you're going to talk about him in that way. That's what I was really excited about Atalanta, because I thought at Atalanta, they supercharge all their attackers. But what it also does is it removes him slightly further away from the English sphere of influence, because obviously Germany is slightly closer to the UK than Italy is. And he'll be at a team where the focus is on the football, less on the celebrity, and he'll have to play as part of a whole under Gasperini, for example. I think somewhere like that, where he can really create his own path and develop into a type of player he wants to, rather than the expectations molding him. I genuinely believe that would be better, because the Dortmund stuff can be so problematic. If he doesn't click there, if he doesn't explode there, his whole career is going to be tarnished forever, unfortunately. And that's actually the way it'll be.
I'm not sure about that. I think, like, for me, like, it was such a signal of the way Callum is viewed in European football that the likes of Leicester and Dortmund instantly come in for him. That, to me, Atalanta.
Yeah,
as well,
and Atalanta.
It shows you how highly he's rated, despite the fact. The incredible thing about Callum going into deadline day for me was that I said this, I think, to Jay, nothing has changed for Callum in the last year at Chelsea, really. Yeah. I'm talking about his standing in the first team. Like, sure, he had some nice moments under Tuchel, but really, has anything drastically changed where Callum sits in the first team squad? And look throughout this whole squad, in particular since Tuchel has arrived, many things have changed for many players.
Everything has changed for everyone.
Christensen is now a almost guaranteed starter. He's become one of Chelsea's most vital defenders. Marcos Alonso has found new life. Jorginho has reached the peak of his career. I could go through the whole team, and you look at several players who have, young or old, have really changed, the trajectories of their career, for good or bad. Some of them aren't here anymore. Kurt Zouma, Tammy Abraham. But for nothing to change for Callum Hudson-Odoi, it's just puzzling. And it gets me back to this, like, longer term thinking by Chelsea. Why did you fight so hard to keep Callum in 2019? Yeah. Why a year later? Why do you buy Christian Pulisic for 60 million and Timo Werner for 45 million? Players who operate in a similar role. And I'm not saying that we don't buy those players. It's just me asking the question.
What is the plan for Callum?
What's the plan for Callum? Like, why do you invest so much time in that? Like, and not
put him on a bumper contract, everything.
Yeah, see it through.
And also, bro, like, go on, Daniel. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, like, if you're not going to, and it's kind of my thing with several young players, it's like, if you're not going to persist with a project, and I know we talk a lot about projects at Chelsea and whether they actually mean anything or not, but it's just like, in particular with Callum, it's a sign. I think Callum is so indicative of a problem that so many players find themselves in at Chelsea. of the high standards, the paradox of, people go, well, he doesn't deserve to start, where it's like, how do you know until he gets a run in the team, or will he ever get a run in the team? So
because he's not really had one ever. If you
look but I do think though, like he's had 100 appearances for Chelsea, which I know they've been few and far between and whatever, but there is genuinely enough there to know what Callum is, and you can still bring up youth football to know what he does. Like the problem is there's two ways of looking at it. Like you saw Klopp's comments on Trent the other day playing for England in midfield. He was like, why would you play the best right back in the world in midfield? Maybe Tuchel, who we all understand is arguably a top 3 coach in the world right now. Yeah. Maybe Tuchel just genuinely doesn't think he's good enough right now. And as well, my problem with Callum, and I'm not saying it's Callum's fault, and I know Daniel and I are always going to sit on different sides to this, is the fact that he's been allowed or not allowed to go on loan was something that made him special, and is now something that's going to come back to really affect him, because every single Chelsea young player that's come through over the last 5 years has had to go on at least one loan. Obviously, Mason had 2, Reece had 1, even Gilmore's gone out, who I think is the most naturally gifted player we have. Tammy went out on various loans. Tomori also did the same. I mean, the list goes on.
Yeah,
he Callum and he got the treatment of being the star boy, but the problem is, like, the injury affected him, and then post-injury, there were so many speculative rumours about whether his camp didn't want him to go on loan, or then the club didn't, or vice versa. It's always been sort of a speculative talking point. But the fact that he's always been the exception to the rule in the way, I think sits uneasily on me. And I think to begin with, it was his camp not wanting to go, and then now the club don't want him to leave. And actually, I think we can all agree that Callum, wherever he goes, the benefit is he'll be getting minutes. And whether it's at Dortmund, which is obviously a great club, and if he goes to Dortmund, I'd be super excited for him. But I would also like him to go to somewhere like, I'd find Benfica or Porto really interesting, Ajax, PSV, Frankfurt, Stuttgart, Wolfsburg. I think Napoli would be exciting considering Insigne's age. Atalanta's obviously the best team in Italy, really, based off all metrics. So there's loads of places he can go and become a player for himself. And the club can loan him out for 2 years and still bring him back. And we know that Callum loves the club. Yeah. Like that's genuinely true. And that's a lot of his motivation for wanting to stay. And that might have actually damaged him more than anything, is his desire to be in this Chelsea team. But you can say, like, okay, well, we'll consider a 2-year loan and we'll reevaluate at the end of the season. You need to get minutes now. And keeping him, I think, is quite unfair considering the depth we have. And I was looking at Reece James's statistics the other day, for example, as a right wing back. And he's in the top 25% of every single measurable stat, defensive and offensive. And he's in the top 15% for almost all of them. Yeah. Like, his numbers are so frightening. Like, how do you expect Callum to get any minutes
exactly
there? That's the only place is feasible.
That's what I was going to bring up just before we move on, is that the positions that he's vying for, there's the pecking order is crazy for him to jump in front of. And I was, like I said, I was even surprised to not see Azpilicueta at right wing back yesterday. And I think for me, it's just, I do disagree with the Dortmund thing a bit, because I do feel, I get where you're coming from with the Sancho comparison, but I still feel like Dortmund is enough of a bubble for him to go and do what he does there with a Erling Haaland, with a Bellingham, with a Reina, other young players, and kind of remove himself from all of that hype and Sancho, etc. But I just think this current environment and situation for him, where I know you mentioned the appearances as well, but the actual games in a row.
Oh yeah, it doesn't exist. Games in a row as well. It doesn't. Yeah,
exist. It doesn't exist. So it's very stop-start for him. It's very in and out, and it's very inconsistent. But we had a good question now in terms of the game, in terms of Alonso as well, wearing the armband. I know you guys were raising your eyebrows when you saw that. I mean, Alonso has had a really good start to the season. Give him credit. I know, obviously, Big Ben Chilwell fans in here as well. So especially Daniel, he's very go-hung on that signing. I think Yannick as well had a hashtag from, I can't remember what it was. But we haven't seen any of him. I don't know how much that has to do with the England situation, where he didn't play any games at the Euros, but he still went. So it kind of still was taxing for him to be there with the training. But Alonso did have a good start to the season with the Villarreal and the Palace game, obviously scoring the goal. Liverpool, he did make that error or that miscommunication with Mendy. But to see him with the armband after not even a year ago, he was on the bus sitting, waiting, watching the game probably on his phone because he got hooked off. I mean, it just goes to show that you can do anything in this life, isn't it? The comeback is incredible.
There's no rules. I'm quite militant about the whole idea of captains. Like, I feel like Daniel tends to agree with me, maybe to a lesser degree, but like, I think it really matters who the captain is. And I hear on Twitter a lot, and I see like people don't really buy into thinking that the captain's armband's a big deal, but I really genuinely believe it is. I think symbols are one of the most important things in football, period. Like, people rally behind a badge or a flag or a kit colour or anything like that. So every emblem matters in football, and the captain's armband's no different. And I personally, I think when Aspi leaves, I think Mason should be captain. That's my thought. And I've said this repeatedly. I believe he is the guy to give the captaincy to, because he's, one, I think he's earned that privilege, and two, he's representative of everything we like about Chelsea, really, or most people anyway. I still struggle when Jorginho wears it.
Really? I think it suits him, honestly. I really do.
Do you know what? I don't know why it is. I think it maybe is my bias, and I'm happy to admit to that. I think he's a very good presence to have, but I think, like, on a pitch when there's Lukaku, Thiago Silva, Aspi, I don't know, and Kante actually, and Kante gets it because his level of performance, right? He leads by example. But
Kante's not really captain material, though, isn't he? We've seen that video on social media.
Yeah, but there's two types of captains. There's two types of captains. yeah, but you have captains that are very vocal, and you have captains that are very quiet but set precedent through their performances. And Kante gets it through that, really, because he never doesn't play. Like, he's always an 8 out of 10 minimum. That's why he gets it, because he sets example. But I agree, he's obviously not the perfect one. Alonso getting it was fruity. I didn't really understand it at all. Especially when Thiago Silva's playing. And actually, there are quite a few players on that pitch that could have that armband over him. So I wasn't really sure on the thoughts behind it, but I sort of read more into that, and I'm sure Daniel can segue onto this, like the significance of what it means for Ben Chilwell, who is one of my favourite players, one of Daniel's favourite players. I don't know what Chilwell's done, but he must have done something
in another life.
You know what I mean? Yeah, he's done something in another life to upset Tuchel, because he's just not getting a chance. And it's no disrespect to Alonso, who has had a great sort of opening few weeks, but it's a shame to not see Chilwell get his chance, but I'm sure he will. And I know people. I can see people in the comments now about Jorginho. I'm not criticising Jorginho. I'm just saying I don't want him as the captain. I don't think that's like that much of a hot take, but if you say Jorginho,
I think it is, because obviously for Italy, I think he's vice captain, and for me, Jorginho, if there's one thing he does have in terms of his personality and his leadership and his characteristics are quite clear. He's always
his
been
character is very strong.
He's always been that guy. I mean, the character speaks for itself to come back from what he's come back from in terms of it's kind of similar to Rudiger in terms of his relationship with the fan base and the up and downs that he's gone through. For those two to come out of it and perform on the level that they have and pick up the individual awards and team awards that he has is incredible. But he's always the one.
He's a top 5 midfielder, isn't he, in the world? Like, there's no doubt.
But for me as a captain as well, it's always important for you to see a picture. I'm not a massive fan of strikers being captains, because I don't feel like they can see the picture and instruct like they need to. Obviously, we've had cases with Henry, but I always tend to go with centre backs and midfielders because they can just see the picture a bit better. But Jorginho is forever instructing and positioning others into, and being kind of like a conductor in that way. So I feel like he does suit the role. Obviously, I get with Silva as well. I think Silva suits it massively. I was shocked when I seen that.
Do you know what my thing is? My thing is of it is like, and actually it's more of a good thing, because if Jorginho's captain, there's no issue with it. He's a very, very good captain. He sets example as well because of his career arc. It's very, Daniel and I have spoken about, it's like a superhero almost, where they sort of start high, drop, and then build up even higher. It's been great. And Jorginho is a top 5 midfielder in the world right now, and that is the way it is. And he's very vocal, he's very good. But I just think if I were to list Chelsea's or what I think Chelsea's best 11 is, is he the first few names I would have as my captain? Me personally, no, he's not. But I can understand why he would be. But also, and actually the really nice thing is that so I'll ask you, Matisse, sorry to take over a bit. But if you have Chelsea's best 11, in my opinion, is Mendy, Reece, Aspi, I don't know, Aspi, then Thiago Silva / Christensen, Rudiger. I still think it's Chilwell. Then you've got J5, Kante, Havertz, Lukaku, Mount. Yeah. I'd say there's 4 or 5 players there that could be captain, personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aspi's a shout, Thiago Silva's a shout, Mason Mount's wore it, Jorginho, and then someone says
also worn it as well.
Rudiger,
Rudiger 100%. I can get behind Rudiger.
I'd say even Rudiger as well.
Shots.
Yeah. When is he going to give up with that, or is he ever going to give up with that? Because I mean, Daniel,
he shouldn't give up. He shouldn't give up.
I know Daniel's a big fan. I'll come to you with that. Yeah, is he ever going to put one of these shots in the top corner? Because at this point, I mean, do you know what? I actually like usually I don't like it because it kills an attack, but this time we were under so much pressure in that first half, and we were having such a poor half to get to halftime 1-0 up. We were actually quite lucky to get there. So when I seen the shot, I was like, thank God he's just killing time, I think.
Yeah, I saw Chelsea Youth put the XG value on that shot was 0.01. Which pretty much summarizes. I think it's in his contract. I don't even know if he's trying to score. I wonder if he's either plays rugby on his off days. So he's trying to just practice on that, or he's trying to take someone out he doesn't like, and he has to.
It's like an in-joke, isn't it? All the players have like a little cardboard cutout of their like player rival, and Rudiger saw his in like row Z and just started booting the ball in, trying to like knock it down.
Yeah, I mean, me and Jay were saying earlier on our podcast that he'll probably do it. He'll probably score in like a game against Spurs at the Bridge, and it'll probably be an Alex type shot that goes into the top corner. But yeah, it's just part of his game, isn't it? He's always going to have that. And, I'd rather if his mad moments come out with him blasting a shot towards North London, I'd rather that than him doing it in defensive moments where he's been actually so dominant and assured since Tuchel's arrived. So it's just a part of his character, isn't it? And it's something that endears him to fans. I love the way he sprints back. I mean, those high knees are just,
he's great.
Moment.
He's such a maverick. But Matisse, can I ask you? And I know, and I'll get Daniel as well. Like, I'm sorry to ask questions, but like,
no, go for it.
I've said repeatedly over the last 6 months, like Jorginho has changed my mind. I loved him, then I was not a fan, and now I really like him again. Yeah. Rudiger, sort of the same goes. But I actually genuinely think Rudiger might be a top 5 centre back in the world right now.
On form, I think so. Yeah,
I think that's fair, right? Because I had people disagreeing, but I think that's fair.
On form, I don't think there's anyone that's been better than him, Christensen, since Tuchel's come in. If you're doing the timeline from when Tuchel came in, or even 2021, because basically that's enough time, right? If you're doing it this calendar year, I don't see anyone who's been better than Rudiger or better than Christensen, because Christensen has been unbelievable. Like, I feel like it's still going under the radar, his record for clean sheets versus matches played. He stepped in for Thiago Silva at times last season where he needed to away to Tottenham, Champions League final, flawless. Goes to Denmark. We know the trials and tribulations they faced at the start of the tournament with Eriksen, shook the core of their squad. They still get to the semi-finals, and he was instrumental as well. Like, Christensen and Rudiger have been immense, and I can't put anyone above them. Maybe people will throw in Diaz, they'll throw in maybe a few others as well rocking around, but I think on form they've been top 3, both of those, and I'm not taking them out of the top 3 at all, no chance. So I've been really impressed. I mean, does that feeling, it's a nice way to segue, I guess, into just briefly before we go back to the match with the contract situation. Does that put you at unease with this contract situation, or are you quite? Because I understand why he's obviously, he's got an opportunity to get a big payday here, and he's got Real Madrid and Bayern Munich sniffing around. There's no surprise, but does that worry you, or are you kind of at ease? If he goes, he goes. If he stays, he stays.
I just actually, I think like 2 or 3 days ago, I wrote an article for Football London where I talked about Rudiger's contract, and I think he's earned what he asks for, to be honest. But I don't think he's irreplaceable in the same way. I genuinely believe that he's been able to reach this level because of the system and the man management that's really, really suited him. He's always had that raw ability, that aggression, that, technically he's much more gifted than people give him credit for, because obviously the pace and power cliches that still linger around like a bad smell. But he's a very, very good passer. He's very assured as a dribbler as well. For a guy that doesn't look particularly hench in the sort of standard way, he's very, very strong. He's very athletic. He's much faster than people realise as well. He's absolutely outstanding, and he's great in the air. I don't know why Chelsea would not extend his contract. But
what does he actually want, though? Do you guys know?
I saw from when I was researching, I think it was around 200,000 a week he's asking for, and the club is stuck on around 130.
130. So, I think that's a bit disrespectful.
So I think that's what he's. I think he might be on 130, or he's like.
He's on 100 right now. I think. Yeah, he's on 100.
Right. I heard potentially maybe even higher than that fee or figure.
Really? Okay.
He wants
but
to
that's
be
like
one of the
you
highest
understand it
paid
though.
players. Yeah, you understand it. But I
It
think
was on 190.
But I think the club is probably looking at it in why they pursued Jules Koundé this summer. Like, despite what I said about Jules Koundé earlier, whatever my opinions about it, I think that's a deal that's going to be inevitable. I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later, maybe as early as January.
Yeah.
And maybe the club are looking at Koundé coming in, the emergence of Chalobah, Christensen's at a good age. We expect that contract to be sorted soon. There seems to be a breakthrough on that. Levi Colwill developing at Huddersfield. We hope that's just not going to be.
You've still got influence on
situation.
Gurhi. Yeah.
I mean,
and you got Mbemba as well.
Mbemba, who I wrote about in the international break, who's now training with the first team. So yeah, I think it's sure a precarious situation. It's a situation that you want to monitor because you don't want to be in a situation next summer where we lose like 3 or 4 centre backs if you include Thiago Silva leaving. Aspi as well. I guess for Rudiger, he, a bit like Jorginho, he's at the peak of his career. Like, this is the peak of his powers. Is it going to get much better than this? For the next sort of 5 years. Can he go any higher than this? I think the only way he goes higher than this is being in a title-winning defence for Chelsea. For season.
But also, you have to think with players like Rudiger, and the difference between players like Rudiger, who I genuinely think on form, like you said, Matisse, Rudiger is actually world class at the moment.
Yeah,
and Jorginho goes without saying he's a world class midfielder, but they can reach that level because the system encourages them and they're being managed in the right way. And that's the difference between world-class players and true greats. And true greats can outgrow the system and still be effective regardless. Whereas I think if Rudiger moves to another team under a different manager, under different circumstances, if I were him, I would look at it and be like, am I going to be in a team that's as solid and that works to my strengths as much as I want? Or do I want the bigger payout and maybe find things a bit harder? You don't know. But there's definitely... I don't think there's any team in Europe better than Chelsea really right now. No, so your chance of winning trophies at Chelsea is higher or just as high as it would be anywhere, right?
And you're with a manager that really loves you and trusts you and knows how to get the best out of you, like you said. I think as well. I think this is very similar to Pep and to Klopp, where they are the kings of their systems and their teams, where they are the key component. And Tuchel is that for us. I think we've seen Klopp and we've seen Pep raise levels in a player like maybe a Zinchenko at left back, where another manager just wouldn't be able to get a Zinchenko at left back playing to that level, or Gundogan playing up front against Liverpool at Anfield getting 2 goals. These managers are propelling these players to levels that they're not usually at, and I don't think Rudiger is for me, I could never really decide who our best defender was when we had Tomori, Zuma, Rudiger, Christensen, because no one took control of the situation, and maybe it was system, maybe it was other variables, but I think Rudiger is playing on an almost freakish level that is just slightly above what he would usually be at. I think usually he'd just be a very good defender and that would be his level. Right now, this is incredible. This is almost legendary status type Sergio Ramos-esque influence that he's on right now. It's ridiculous. So I do think that I agree with you. I think he's currently in a position, especially in this back three, he loves to go on these mazy runs as well. And it seems to be, I didn't know he had it in him, but it seems to be something that he's really, really good at. He definitely seems to be very much, thriving off of this system. And of course, he's obviously stepped up as well. And he's bringing, I think the one thing we will lose with him when we talk about replacing him, because I do think Levi Colwill can come in and other players. Well, if Levi Colwill develops, I don't want to jinx it with Tomori and Gurhi. I'm out for 3 here in terms of the third strike, but I do think we can replace this, these defenders long term. But one thing I will say that we can't replace is strangling Suarez and beefing against Leicester. Like, there's a certain attitude and swagger and aggression that he's bringing to this defense that we're going to miss if he does go for free. And that's something that I don't see in the other, defenders that are coming through. I haven't seen that yet. Maybe they're young, so they're going to have to grow into it. But if we do end up losing Rudiger, Silva and Azpilicueta in the same summer, I think that would be almost catastrophic. We can't afford to lose 3 players of that experience.
I don't think that'll happen.
Yeah, we can't afford that.
I think Azpi will get 1 year, and I think Rudiger will sign a contract, to be honest. I think he obviously wants to play for Chelsea. So it's about the club meeting him halfway, and obviously they're going to try and do what they've got to do. But I would really not be surprised if Rudiger stays. I think Thiago Silva is the most likely to not be here next season, just because of his age and things like that.
Okay, I'm going to read out this super chat just before we move on, because there's two performances in this back line we haven't spoken of before we move on. But Pycraft says our depth is immense. Whoever gets a chance just needs to make the most of it and needs to be consistent. That's the level we are at now operating in. And I, for one, love it. Trust Tuchel. Facts, man. Love the super chat. And thank you so much for the support. New here. Sorry, I've missed that. Someone said it. There we go. New here. This is great analysis. Better than any other Chelsea content I've seen. Good vibes. Appreciate it, bro. I want to move on to the performance of Mendy, because just before we get to that attack, and I think, that attack was a little bit outside Lukaku, wasn't really, what we'd hoped for in terms of performance levels. So we'll get to that. But on a positive, Mendy was absolutely incredible. And I think the scouting to have recruited this guy for the money we've brought him in for, Petr Cech obviously being at the heart of that, deserves so much credit. It just goes to show what good scouting can do, because not a single Chelsea fan mentioned this man to me that I seen anyway before he came in. Donnarumma was one of the people that were on that list, and maybe a couple of others as well. But the way that he's come in and not only been the, traditional, commanding figure in goal that comes out and collects crosses and obviously fixes our horrendous set piece record from the year before. Ball playing ability is fine as well, but the shot stopping in this game was De Gea-like. I mean, Daniel, what did you make of the performance? Because he really did keep us in that game in the first half in terms of keeping us ahead. They had Watkins, they had a few other moments as well where they cut through the middle of our defense and he made some outstanding saves.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm surprised with that performance from Edouard Mendy, because that's sort of the level he's maintained since he arrived at Chelsea. I think it says a lot that I have no concerns over goalkeeper now. It's an area you set, that's our goalkeeper. That's the one who plays every single week, or at least should be playing 99% of the time when he's available, because he's that good. Made 6 saves. Chelsea are yet to concede a goal in the Premier League this season from open play. That's kind of speaks to the defensive security, but obviously a part of that is Edouard Mendy and the relationship he has with his backline. I saw this from our colleague Sam Inkersol. Since Tuchel has arrived, Chelsea have 22 clean sheets in 35 games in all competitions, which is just, ridiculous. And a part of that is Mendy, the way he commands his box. His reflexes for such a tall guy is really impressive. I remember one of his first performances for Chelsea was against Sevilla in the Champions League last year, and he made this really good reaction save where he's amazing at shifting, like, even if his balance is off, like, he's still able to get a powerful hand on something. You saw that several times in the first half, like the way he's able to shift and move his body. I mean, for such a tall guy as well, is so impressive. Like, the flexibility within that and the coordination too is just sublime. And I just want to say that, like, I think that what Mendy proves, like last summer, is it's not just about the quality, individual quality of the player you bring in to upgrade your team. It's about the character you bring in, those intangibles that we can't find on a spreadsheet. The way he integrates with the first team squad, the way he communicates with the players around him, the way he is a positive influence, the way he raises standards. Mendy, along with Ben Chilwell, along with Thiago Silva last summer and a few others, it's the type of character you bring in that really, I think, raises the standards within the dressing room. And, I know that me and Jay had some conversations in the springtime about, Donnarumma being available. And I think it just got to a point where, like, and this is not to crap on Donnarumma, because he's a young goalkeeper who I'm sure is going to be one of Europe's best. And given Mendy's age, there's nothing to say that Donnarumma might not end up at Chelsea one day. That may still happen later down in his career. But Mendy currently is performing at such a great level. His Real Madrid performance, for instance, where he made some key saves from Karim Benzema. I think for a lot of last season, there was kind of this belief that, is he just a stopgap kind of goalkeeper? Yeah. He's risen above that now. He is, for me, he's not only the best goalkeeper in the Champions League, awarded from UEFA last year. Yeah. He is, to win a Premier League title, you need to be world-class up top, but you also need to be world-class in between the sticks, and that's what we have in Mendy. We now have sorted our two key, two of the most important areas. And I can't speak highly enough of Mendy. Such a wonderful presence to have, and praise Petr Cech. The guy knows how to spot an amazing talent.
I think with Mendy though, Mendy is what I said about Callum, and I seen the super chat. We'll come on to that in a second, Matisse. But you know how I said with Callum and Dortmund, there's a weight of expectation.
Yeah.
And it's impossible to avoid weight of expectation in football. But Mendy came in and the only expectation was to be better than the worst keeper in the Premier League.
Yeah.
That was the only expectation. So what he's been able to do, because he's not had that weight on his shoulders, that pressure, he's been able to just rock it up without anything preventing him. And that's like, imagine if you could harness that expectation level on every new player that comes in and give them time and understanding that let them build what they are rather than we set the bar in the same way. Obviously, they have to win things, they have to achieve, and they have to do that. That's expected regardless. But like Mendy hasn't had no expectation other than please be better than Kepa. And look at what's happened when he's had no real pressure on him. It's amazing.
Yeah, I can't speak highly enough of him. And I think if Donnarumma had come in and maybe started ahead of him, I think it would have sent out the complete wrong signal. I know at certain times, I think you just have to say no. Do you know what I mean? I know there's certain players that you can acquire in a window and it's too good of an opportunity to miss. But I think Mendy, what he symbolizes, how he's come up, you know, with the unemployment, the story, and the story is always important because I think, like Daniel said, these intangibles, we don't speak about them highly enough. It's what makes up a person, a character. It's what stops a person from becoming complacent, which I don't think will happen with Mendy. And I was very slow to give him that world-class tag, maybe a lot slower than a lot of other Chelsea fans, because I didn't want to rush into that and build up my hopes too much. I just wanted to kind of enjoy the moment and enjoy the performances he were putting out. But I think one thing I will say is when Ederson and Alisson came to this league and started putting in these level performances after a year, they were given that world-class tag. So if they're going to be given that world-class tag, and deservedly so, I think Mendy deserves to get the world-class tag.
100%. He is. Because, he is.
Yeah. I really do. I mean, because the performances that he's putting in, especially in a team that don't give up a lot of chances, that's where I worry the most for a goalkeeper, because your concentration needs to be at the top elite level, because you're not going to have to make many saves. This defense is incredible, as we've been said. And that was almost what a lot of people were thinking with Mendy. Maybe he's not being tested enough because the defense is so good. The structure is so good. We're not, conceding many chances under Tuchel, but it just goes to show that in the big moments when he does need to be called upon, he is going to make big saves. And I've always likened him to Elastigirl, because I just think them arms, man, it's just it's incredible.
Listen to this as well, just quickly.
Go for
it. I'm looking at FB ref, right, for Mendy.
Yeah.
He ranks in the top 1% of goalkeepers in the world for goals against, save percentage, and clean sheets.
Wow.
That's a world-class goalkeeper.
Wow. And look, Kepa's been really good since Tuchel came in. I think he's done well as a deputy. One of the analogies I've been using is that you don't hire a manager to flip burgers. I think if he comes in on that wage and that money, being a good backup goalkeeper still isn't good enough. But we know his statistics before Tuchel came in, and that there, what you've just read out, is the complete opposite. It's night and day. So, I mean, Daniel, are you ready to give him the world-class tag from what you've seen, or would you like this season to be completed? Maybe a Premier League medal would solidify that.
I mean, I think we all overuse world-class, to be honest, and I don't know how much weight that tag actually means anymore, because
I always use it as maybe top 5 in the position.
Yeah. Like I think
I'd say he's top 5.
So in my own reference, when I'm calling a player world class, I think that he has to be, you have to consistently be putting in top class performances week in, week out. You have to be upgrading your team. You become an essential player for your team. Like, your team can't operate without you to the same level. It's a bit like the way I speak about Mason Mount. Chelsea with and without Mason Mount, Chelsea with and without N'Golo Kante are very different teams. That's what Mendy has become, and it's not, I think Kepa, I'm happy that Kepa's feeling a little bit more settled now, but, I heard some shouts before this game that maybe if you're going to rotate, you rotate the keeper. It's just, for me, no, I don't mind seeing Kepa, obviously, give him the League Cup games, maybe a couple of the Champions League group games later down the line. But listen, man, we've got one of the best goalkeepers currently in world football, and the stats show it. So you've got to be playing him if we want to have the best chance of winning big titles.
Yeah, I agree with that. Lee says, thoughts on Ziyech? For me, he's a luxury player and a little one-dimensional. I feel like with Ziyech, right, these conversations are literally like on a conveyor belt. They just keep rotating and coming back. 1 minute he's God's grace and he's the best thing since sliced bread, and he's the difference maker and the one attacker that we have that offers something different, the Wizard of London. And then we go back to luxury player, one-dimensional. And I'm not going against you, Lee. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying it feels like we're just going back and forth here with Ziyech, and it's one of the things that, you know, because I've got things wrong with Rudiger, with Christensen, but with Ziyech, I feel like I was pretty much spot on with the way this would go with him in his Chelsea career. And I wasn't anticipating the injuries. I just was anticipating the inconsistency and the messed up headspace that fans would be in, where they don't even know how to rate him. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, it's just very fluctuating. I'm going to actually stick up for him a little bit here is the fact that once again, he was on form in pre-season like he was last season when he did get his cameos under Lampard at the start. And unfortunately, he gets another injury. And again, it stops him from building up any momentum and any sort of consistency in the team. Then he comes back into the team after beefing with his manager from Morocco. And then he drops in a performance which wasn't very good. So I don't know at this point. For me, I just feel like it comes down to not consistently being on the pitch. And I've always said this about Ziyech. He's not, for me, an impact player. He's not a player that can have cameos. He's not a player that comes off the bench. In that Ajax team, he was playing week in, week out, every single game, player of the year. He wants to have the most touches, to be the most influential, to be the main man, even though he is a free spirit. And I think at Chelsea, because he's maybe a smaller fish in a big pond, it doesn't suit him. And this dynamic that he had with Kai's been kind of dropping into the left channel anyway, I think, since Lukaku's coming in, which is something I wanted to see, because a lot of people were saying, how is Havertz and Lukaku going to play in the same team? They kind of operate in the same half space. Lukaku likes to go to the right and cut in on his left foot, and it's been clear straight away in these opening fixtures. Kai's kind of dropped deep in that left forward role. Mason Mount's been on the right, or whoever's been on the right, and Kai's kind of become this, you know, guy that goes in between the lines and drops deep and tries to get more touches on the ball. That's what Ziyech wants to do on the other side. Ziyech is used to people funneling the ball into him and him being that kind of Grealish at Aston Villa type guy, and he's not that for Chelsea. So, I mean, I'll start with you, Jay. How do you feel about Ziyech's performances in this game?
I mean, I just think with Ziyech, I'd like people to be a bit more fun and creative with him. I think he'd be an amazing deep six, just for a laugh. I think he'd be a really fun, like, yeah. I think he'd be a really fun 8-10 as well. I like him way more centrally than I do out wide. Even though he is one-footed, his passing is obviously outrageous and he can shoot from distance. So, and I think he's really useful to the team in transition. If we were to play counter-attacking, I like the idea of the sort of Ziyech, Werner, Lukaku trio, or like Ziyech, Mount, Lukaku sort of. I think he's very helpful there. But, you know, and this is no disrespect, because what I'm going to say, people will think is a criticism. It isn't. But I just don't think, to see the best Ziyech, I think he needs to be in a different league. And that's not because he's not good enough for the Premier League, but he could be the best of his abilities in Italy. Like, the Italian league screams for someone like Ziyech. Like, him in an AC Milan kit, full control, like free flowing, would be perfect for him. He needs that, and some players are built that way. You know what I mean? They need to be the star of the team, and their ability deserves it. And Ziyech is the same. He really does deserve to be the hub of a team, because when he's given that license and freedom to be expressive and creative, he's, as the numbers have seen, and as we've seen in glimpses at Chelsea, he's pretty unstoppable. But, you know, again, he's just part of the crew, isn't he? He's just part of the group of attackers that don't always play. And I can understand his frustrations. I think it's hard to maintain consistently excellent performances if you're not playing all the time, which is Daniel's point on Callum as well, which is obviously true. But yeah, man, he's just a bit of an enigma, isn't he? And his age is baffling, and you know, everything about him is just odd. It's really odd, and I would like things to maybe be a bit more creative, because I don't think he's as one-dimensional as perhaps he comes across. I just think it needs to be tactically that he's freed up. But under Tuchel, I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily.
What about you, Daniel?
Yeah, I think that since, you know, you probably look at the players who haven't benefited from Tuchel's arrival, you'd obviously say most notably Tammy Abraham, Kurt Zouma, and I think Ziyech falls into that category. You know, because Ziyech, it was quite clear under Lampard that he was, I think Frank saw him as the creative hub, you know, a player who would drop into central areas. We get the ball out wide on the right, and that's where the creativity would come from, you know, those overlapping runs from Reece James. And for a few weeks, that was working well, you know, in that 4-3-3. But then, of course, Ziyech got injured. And by the time he came back, he was struggling for fitness, struggling to get back into any sort of rhythm. And, within a couple of weeks, Frank Lampard was gone. And then you're bringing in a coach who tactically is very different, has a very structured way of playing. And despite Tuchel has spoken in his time with Chelsea and the PSG, he wants to give attackers the freedom to express when they get into central areas. It still is not rigid in a bad way, but Tuchel has a very precise way of playing, and he's a master of space, and he's very precise about the way he will set up the team week to week, depending on I analysed the front three against Liverpool and Arsenal, and they operated in very different ways against two different teams. Against Arsenal, we played kind of more as a split striker at times, where Mount and Kai would drop a little bit deeper and one would stay up with Lukaku. And then against Liverpool, it was more of a front three, a very narrow front three. And I don't think that suits Ziyech. I think Ziyech you need to create a bespoke role for him in your team. He needs to become the guy who dictates play. He is a bit like a Fabregas type figure who plays a little bit further forward. I think you saw it yesterday where at times he's kind of operates as a number 8 rather than as a winger. He's not a winger. That's not how, to me, if I was to define a winger, in terms, especially in the modern game, he is someone who always is looking to drift in. Probably in a 4-3-3, I'd love to see him as a number 8, as Jay said, if you're trying more interesting tactical things. Yeah. And it's a shame because I watched him. I was there for the Spurs friendly, and he was incredible in that game. Not only in terms of his finishing and creativity, just in terms of his all-round work rate. It looked like he'd really, his fitness had really improved, and he was really understanding what Tuchel wanted from the counter press, and really being up there and energetic and across the pitch. And it's difficult. I think the shame of it yesterday was that he never really was able to get into the areas that I predicted he would, because the game didn't take the path that I thought it would. I thought Chelsea would be a lot more in control. I didn't expect Villa to press that high. So the game was quite erratic. Chelsea were dispersed in that first half, and in the second half, it was a lot different. And I personally thought he was going to kind of play that number 10 role with Havertz and Lukaku in front of him. And really that never materialized for him. So I don't think the situation really was the best suited to Ziyech. I'd personally I wouldn't mind seeing him again against Zenit. A game that I do think may be a little bit more dominant for him. It's like with any player, you need consistent rhythm. Yeah. If you're constantly being shifted in and out of the team, you get injured, you're taken out. Like that momentum that I think Ziyech built up very early on under Lampard was because he was a guaranteed starter. You knew he was going to be playing, and he very quickly found his rhythm. Now, Tuchel is a manager very comfortable for rotation. He likes using a big squad, and I just don't think for such a unique talent like Ziyech, who is so different to I think what Tuchel requires from an attacker. I'm not quite sure if it's ever going to work out for him at Chelsea to the extent that I think you believed it would when he originally signed. He may just be a very good, if he can operate as a very good rotational player that is a bit of a wild card at times that completely changes the complexion of things with that left foot of his. But I'm not quite sure if he's ever going to be a dominant attacker for Chelsea, if you know what I'm saying. I think I think Tuchel sees him as more of that kind of player that I can bring in every now and then, which is good for Tuchel, not good for the player, as we were saying with Callum.
Yeah, I think with Ziyech it's an interesting one because it feels like a common thread with all these attackers, whether it be Ziyech, Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, particularly those three. I've always said this is a big season for all of them because I do feel like one of them will leave at the end of this season if they don't. Well, you'd expect one of them to be unhappy with their game time because there is so many of them, and they're all lacking that consistency, that consistent game time. And to build up some sort of momentum, it feels very, much the same situation for all of them. And it's great for us because we've got a big squad and a deep squad. But even with Manchester City, with their deep attack, at the end, Sané did leave. Now, obviously, that may have been personal issues with Pep and et cetera, et cetera. But at some point, with depth comes demise with someone. At some point, someone's going to suffer because of the amount of depth that we have. And I think one of those three attackers will suffer at one point, because for their careers, it just... They're too good to be on the bench. They're too good to be rotational players. And like I said, with Pep, it works at Man City, but most teams, they do have, clear attackers that start week in, week out, whether you look at Bayern Munich or you look at Liverpool, and then they have clear secondary options. And these guys are kind of all just flirting in this blurred line where they just can't quite make a stamp on this team. And it is kind of making our attack a little bit more inconsistent than we would hope for as well. When you look at the previous great Chelsea attacks with maybe a Drogba and a Nelka partnership, or Eden Hazard and Costa, and even the Mata Oscar Hazard combination as well, which put a great season together statistically as well. There was a repetitiveness and a chemistry established, and it doesn't feel like there's ever really going to be a consistent chemistry in this attack, because there is so much rotation and inconsistency, injuries and in out, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a weird one.
I think there's two ways to look at it though. There's firstly, I think realistically now we'll probably see Kai, Mount and Lukaku as the first choice front three, I think.
Yeah.
And then also, obviously you're really bang on with the point on the attacking partnerships perhaps lacking, but they're growing, and it lacks in a way because there is that search for who are going to be the three. But it's also worth remembering, like, there are other partnerships in the team that we have now that are stronger than partnerships in those areas before, to certain extents. Like Kante Jorginho is a very, very strong partnership that now works very well. Like how our defenders work with each other works very well. We're very successful, and we haven't seen defensive solidity like that for a long, long time. So there are partnerships that have become established and worked well in the team. And I saw Daniel nod there because I know he agrees with me. When you see sort of Mount, Havertz, Lukaku play consistently more, I think that'll be the sort of combination that we see the most. And yeah, we will lose one or two of Puli, Ziyech, Callum, Timo over the next season or two. Yeah, and that's just unfortunately the way that it is, isn't it?
Yeah, unfortunately. So Adela here with the super chat says, seems like Saul will need time to adjust to the speed of the league. We probably should have kept Billy G. I think that's a bit too far-fetched in my opinion to say. I think first of all, Gilmour, I am a bit worried with the level of the team that we've sent him to. Obviously, they get rid of Buendia. They almost get rid of Cantwell. They look like a team that potentially will go back down. And we've seen that with Gallagher at West Brom. We've seen that with Loftus-Cheek at Fulham. And we've seen that with Ampadu at Sheffield United. And now you only have to take a look at Gallagher and maybe a little bit more of a talented Palace team where there's a lot more threats with Zaha and Eze will come back, and a few others as well. Mark Gurhey there. They've just signed Edouard from Celtic. Surround talent with talent, and it helps them a lot to actually showcase their ability. And I feel like Gilmour might be in a sinking ship there. But I wouldn't. But Gilmour also did need minutes as well, and he wasn't getting that under Tuchel. And I think it's important to highlight what we said earlier in the show, which was that these young players almost have to build up credit. You don't just get to take out a mortgage. You need to build up credit, and you need to pay back a couple loans to show that you can be trusted. That's the same kind of way I would look at a Gilmour or a Hudson-Odoi. They haven't built up enough credit to show that they can be trusted consistently ahead of maybe some more senior players. And that's why these loan deals for Mason Mount, for Reece James, Tammy when he was here, Tomori, that's why it's worked in their favour to now either get big moves or to play regularly in this Chelsea team, because they've built up credit. Gallagher's absolutely balling out at the moment. Gallagher playing so well for Palace at the start of the season and bringing to the table some goals and assists before we get to the headline act, which is obviously Lukaku, the lead singer in this team. But Gallagher getting a couple goals and adding that GA, hopefully, to his game with the assist to Zaha, that's something that this midfield doesn't have. Do you guys think that, because we've seen unexpected turns before with Trevor coming in when everyone expected Gurhey, do you see Gallagher potentially taking Gilmour's spot when he comes back, in terms of like, we all think we're warm in the seat for Gilmour, and it could be Gallagher that takes it when the preseason starts next season? Whoever wants to take it.
I know Jay's going to be more passionate than me about this, but I saw this yesterday, like people saying, oh yeah, like with Gallagher, now we no longer need to try and sign Declan Rice next summer. And it's like two different players, two different midfielders.
Yeah.
Operate in different ways. I think that the battle for Gilmour will be who's in that central midfield, 6, deep midfield area when he returns. That will be the way his career goes. I think for Gallagher, he's done really well. I mean, gold dust. I mean, if you can find a goal scoring midfielder, someone like him. I mean, some of the finishes against West Ham were the sort of thing that a striker would be very proud of. And you saw him yesterday. It's a very cheap reference, comparison, but he reminds me a lot of Mason Mount. You could tell why coaches would love to have him in their team. Obviously, he's a lot more raw than Mason, and he, in terms of some of his finishing, quite wayward, and he was obviously quite excited yesterday. But you can see the influence he has. He's one of those players that I think will so greatly benefit this year from playing in a team that will allow him to express a lot more, get into those central areas, a bit like when Ruben was at Palace. Ruben's loan to Palace was really successful. It really developed him as a player. And I think that it'll be the same for Gallagher. I guess my only issue is, once again, what's the plan for Gallagher when that loan move?
He's going to be sold for money.
Buy back, baby.
He's going to be sold.
Because I think my sentimental sort of feeling is that, it'd be great for him to come back and to feature in the squad. But I mean, the issue for any young attacker or any young player in that area is that you look at who you'd be competing with. Mason Mount. If Mason Mount continues on the same path, guaranteed Chelsea starter. If Kai Havertz has a stronger second season at Chelsea, probably a guaranteed starter. We just spoke, Ziyech, Hudson-Odoi, Pulisic. These are 3 players and I think Werner may fall into that category too.
Yeah.
So it's what Gallagher would want. And unfortunately for Chelsea is that there's now example of players who have basically have sent the message, you don't have to stick around. There's going to be players there. I did say to Jay earlier that I do wonder, like, price-wise, like, who would be able, because it's a different level for Gallagher. He's been in several championship loans, and now he's got his second Premier League loan.
He'll be the same as Willock.
Yeah,
I think he'd be the same as Willock.
It may be a 30 mil thing, and you never know if he has a really successful loan at Palace and he looks at the Chelsea midfield area, especially attacking midfield, and thinks, I'm not going to get in there.
Yeah, he's almost too good to come back here.
Yeah,
because there's just no space.
Bro, his position in comparison to Gilmour is completely different. Like Gilmour, and I know people get upset when I say this, but he's obviously not the same or as good. But he is more in the Jorginho area of the pitch. His heat map will probably be a little bit more there. He is slightly more industrious and less suave right now, but like that'll be where he steps into eventually. Yeah. Whereas Gallagher needs to be in and around the attackers, whereas Gilmour doesn't. And unfortunately, the way Chelsea play at the moment, there's no space for that. And even in the future, it's unlikely. I think Chelsea could be smart with him and say, okay, well, we'll give you 30 million and Conor Gallagher for Declan Rice next season. Or if Maddison moves from Leicester, Leicester could come in for someone like Conor Gallagher and switch up how they play a little bit. There's going to be plenty of options for him. He'll walk into most decent Premier League teams. Everton obviously will need a player of, who can operate in that attacking midfield role as well. So again, I wouldn't be surprised to see him at Leeds either. Like he's perfectly good for all those clubs, and actually he should do a Guehi and move and really try and lock it down, because Chelsea are always going to be interesting good players, whether they've been at Chelsea or not before. So it's totally okay. And actually, I genuinely see, for some reason, I think it's more likely that Bellingham will play for Chelsea than Gallagher.
I was about to say that. Yeah, I do believe that as well.
Yeah. So Gallagher's doing excellent, and being at Chelsea will help his CV, but he's going to be a 20 to 30 million pound player that someone buys next season and helps Chelsea buy their targets, really, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way it is, unfortunately for him, if he really wants to play for Chelsea. But he can be at most Premier League clubs and be totally fine.
Yeah, I think Kante, Kova, Jorginho being late 20s, early 30s, everybody's kind of like almost trying to speed up time and push them and say, right, when we're going to replace these 3 with maybe a Gallagher or a Rice or Bellingham or Tchouaméni or whoever it may be. But the reality of it is that these players that we're talking about with your Kantes and your Kovas and your Jorginhos, they're inevitable. They keep coming back and doing the business. Do you know what I mean? Jorginho's...
And there's an extensive list, bro, of English attacking midfielders over the last 15 years that were really good when they burst onto the scene and then have an injury or something goes wrong in the media. And they thought, like Dele Alli, prime example, Ross Barkley, prime example. Like the list actually goes on. So Gallagher, it does look great, but, wait out the whole season and see where he's at then. And and I don't think he'll be at Chelsea, unfortunately. That's not because he's not good enough necessarily. It's just the hierarchy and the way things are going. Like when you bring in Declan Rice, when Gilmour's going to play, or Tchouaméni or whoever else, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
Yeah. Vendor with the super chat says, aside from Lukaku, who scores double digits for us this season, don't we need at least 2, if not 3 double digit scorers to compete with Manchester City and Man United? Well,
questions.
Yeah, well, this does bring us to the main course for the afternoon. I've had enough appetizers for you guys the whole stream, but Lukaku is obviously the main man of the show. We'll talk about the performance and then get to that question. For me personally, I think this guy he is almost perfect. I very rarely like to say perfection because I feel like there's always something that someone can do to do better, but it's pretty close. I mean, I likened him to when we signed Diego Costa, not in terms of the just ability or anything like that, but just, well, actually, yeah, in terms of obviously ability, but also just the feeling that it gives me when I see Lukaku in the team is the same feeling I had when Diego Costa scored the first few games in the season when he signed. I just felt like that is a title-winning type of striker that we've just acquired and can take us all the way and be the final jigsaw in the puzzle. Lukaku, you're talking about probably one of the most complete strikers in the world right now because, and this is not to bash on Harry Kane or anything, but he does always pick up that injury a season. He's not the quickest, but Lukaku will run the channels physically, absolutely in his prime. I've not seen him more cut than this in terms of just his body shape is perfect for the position that he's playing in while still maintaining the strength. Finishing with both feet. I mean, he came out and said it. He knew the defender from his time at Manchester United. So he was able to check back in on his right foot. And he does this often where he is very comfortable taking the shot of his right, even though we all know he's predominantly left footed, because he has a technique where he's just going to hit it hard and low, and he's going to show the conviction and the consistency with it, and he's going to put the ball in the back of the net. All the finishes that we've seen from him, right foot in the box, taking advantage of a Reece James cross as well, which is something that I've been banging on about for the last 2 seasons. And then obviously the left foot shot into the top corner. Incredible, just incredible. And the header against Arsenal was close as well. And then obviously the little intangibles, kissing the badge, the leadership and mentality that he's bringing as well. I mean, Daniel, how do you feel about this man coming in? Because everybody was hung up on Erling Haaland. And Erling Haaland, by the way, is absolutely blitzing it in the Bundesliga. He had a great night, but nobody in the Chelsea fan base is talking about it. And that just goes to show how great Lukaku's been.
Yeah, I mean, my dream transfer wasn't Erling Haaland. It was Lukaku. And the receipts are there from me and Jay from back in like March, where we started having conversations about who we wanted as striker. And I remember both of us kind of saying, because he was obviously doing amazing things for Inter, just saying it just felt like the logical transfer, the perfect fit, the Amazon Prime forward who would come back to Chelsea, unfinished business. It's kind of this perfect meeting of the player we needed, the player we required to transform our attack, but there's also so much sentiment and narrative packed behind it, which makes it such a beautiful signing. And, you saw last night the emotion on his face, like scoring at the shed end and then scoring at the Matthew Harding. It's knowing that he's a Chelsea fan and has been since that's been his dream since the age of 10. Every Chelsea fan can relate to that. And we've all dreamed in our life of doing that, of scoring at the bridge. And you can live through Lukaku despite being one of the greatest forwards we've seen in Premier League history. There's so much to love about that. I mean, looking at stats, he touched the ball only 25 times last night, which I think was less than any other outfield player in the game, which, summarizes the level of talent. I looked at the XG, compare it to Ronaldo. Lukaku's 2 goals, the value of both of those chances, those 2 shots were lower than the XG that Ronaldo had. If you want to start doing Ronaldo-Lukaku comparison,
which they will do.
And I do for a piece that's just gone out today. But it just shows you the quality of forward we've acquired. This is a guy who is the complete centre forward. The first 3 goals he scored for Chelsea since returning have proved that, as you said, something in the box, a cut back where it's just a very simple tap in, but that was about his aggression to shrug off Pablo Murray and get there, the aggression and the willingness to get there, to know when to be there. And his other 2 goals, the being able to run in behind, showing that we're not going to lack speed with Lukaku in the team. I saw some shouts that, well, if we don't have Werner, we're going to lack a lot of speed. No, Lukaku is a rapid player. He's a deceptively quick player, and he also has the technical ability because it was a wonderful pass from Mateo Kovacic, absolutely brilliant. But Lukaku still has to do a bit to score the goal, and it's the same with the second strike. I mean, it's just dream stuff, man. I mean, since Diego, we haven't had anyone of this quality. And a bit like Diego, the moment Diego came in, the levels in our attack, we grew up in our attack. And I think that we've justified a lot of errors over recent years, and kind of the quality in that area, especially last season, not being that good and making excuses for it. The moment you bring in Lukaku, you can just see the jump. And just a quick point, I think that Mateo Kovacic, that pass he made, is a summary of how Lukaku, I think, is going to give midfielders confidence and players in his team confidence to play the ball to him early. When they would, big frustration of us last year was that midfielders, when they got the ball and you'd see Werner or someone make a run, they wouldn't play that pass early. I think Lukaku is going to give confidence to the rest of the team, basically, to play that ball to him, because he can hold it up, he can bring others into play, but he also, of course, can run it behind and score. So all round, I mean, the nonsense discussions we were having on Football London about like resale value. I mean, this guy he scored 3 in 3 since returning to Chelsea. The stats prove that it's going to be a lethal striker, and as like you said, Matisse, it reminds me of Diego. It reminds me, maybe not so much as Didier, because I was having a conversation with my dad last night. Like, Didier was never
ruthless, like in front of goal.
He was a brilliant scorer of massive goals. That was that was what made him an icon at this club. Lukaku is more like Costa, because Costa came in and instantly took Chelsea to a level, like week in, week out, was consistently putting the ball in the back of the net. Like he became that guy that you just filtered everything through. So, man, I could talk about Lukaku for hours. It was emotional. It's majestic, and I'm so happy to see him in the Chelsea shirt, because for me, he was the first choice option. He just was, and I'm so happy. My dream transfer actually happened. That's the great.
It's the age profile as well. Go for it.
Yeah, we said like how pleasant it is when a signing you want to make happens and it works. It's a really pleasant and seemingly increasingly rare experience to have. But just to answer this question here, I've lamented this point, but like the idea of like we have to have 25 goals a season from one player in the league, otherwise you won't win the league. I don't necessarily agree with that completely, but think about it. I think Kai is going to be a double-digit goal scorer across all comps. I think Mason will be as well. Jorginho will pop up with the odd one. Kovacic finally with some end product. Like a little bit more of that would be lovely. Alonso can unconventionally get 4 to 6 goals a season, as can Chilwell if he plays. I expect Reece to get between 4 and 6 goals all comps. Between the back three, they can get maybe 5 goals. Obviously, no Zuma. Werner can do what Werner does. Pooley, when he plays, gets goals as well. Like, goals are they're a common thing for a lot of our players to do, or should be at least. And that's something we lacked, especially under Frank last season. Unfortunately, was the goals being shared and the opportunities. There's a lot of players in this team that are excellent finishers and that have consistently scored goals when they've played in different sides and even when they've had a run in the team. So I don't think it's anything to worry about. You just give them a bit of time to click and the goals will be thick and fast. And obviously Lukaku doesn't miss chances very often. Like you can see his development. It's amazing. So I think going forward now, we're as strong as we are at the back, and that's why Chelsea is such an issue for teams to deal with.
Yeah, I think when they look at Man United, they just see Bruno and they see Ronaldo, and like it's just
Bruno's goal was insane.
Bruno's goal was ridiculous, and I'm still waiting for a Chelsea player to hit it from that range and do that.
Rudiger. Rudiger,
really, with the technique that Bruno showed, the closest that I can see in this team is maybe a Mason Mount or a Ziyech to doing that. From that distance, obviously Trevor
Bruno's goals in training, bro. He was banging them top corner in training as well, like at the ground, like before kickoff. Unbelievable.
He's brilliant at it. He is a shooter. Do you know what I mean? He's a proper second striker for me. I don't even see him as a midfielder. I just see him as a second striker.
He's a killer. Yeah,
he really is. But when it comes down to this Ronaldo comparison as well, I think obviously they've just had it for the Scudetto, and I think it's only going to do Lukaku good. He loves proving people wrong. He loves the doubters. He loves the drive and force, and he knows Man United fans are going to give him stick, and they're going to do this Ronaldo thing with it. So look, the Golden Boot race is going to be incredible this year, and I think the title race is going to be incredible as well. So you've got Mohamed Salah, who's always guaranteed a certain amount of goals. Harry Kane the same, and then you add Ronaldo and Lukaku into it. It's going to be madness. So I just think Lukaku, with everything that he's bringing, and then the intangibles on top, and resale value is just not something that we need to be clinging onto every single transfer. Of course, clearly we're very well run right now. We didn't even spend any money this summer, and of course sometimes we will take a look at that, but sometimes you just need to bring in someone who immediately fixes an issue. And it's no surprise we haven't won the title since we had a Courtois and a Diego Costa up front. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It is the two parts of the pitch that I keep banging on about that are crucial. You can't do anything without those two positions. If you mess up one of those positions, you aren't going anywhere in this world in terms of titles and trophies, because you just need to have some sort of in this world. You just need to have some sort of.
I reckon I got a hot take that Calvert-Lewin's going to score more than Kane in the league this season.
Really?
Like I don't think Kane does not want to be there.
But I feel like Kane will. The only reason why I'll go against that is because I feel like Kane knows that if he doesn't do the business, he's not leaving that club, period, now. Because if he wants to go next summer, Mbappe's available, Erling Haaland's available, and that's two strikers that are going to cost less than him because of the release clause and the free, and they're younger than him. So if he wants, so he has to deliver this season, or it's going to be a long day. But listen, guys, it's been a great stream. We've addressed everything. I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to Chelsea. You can't even really fit it into a stream at this point. But absolute pleasure talking to you guys as always. And Daniel, first of all, let them know where to find you, bro. Any content coming out. And thanks again for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
No, it was a really fun conversation as ever. So I haven't been able to upload as many videos onto my own channel, but there'll be a review of the Aston Villa game going up this afternoon. That I've already recorded, and maybe some other content. Me and Jay recorded our own podcast every other Sunday that'll be going out probably today or tomorrow, that covers the game and covers some other topics as well that I don't think we discussed on this stream. My Football London work, obviously for Carefree Chelsea, there's a lot of articles going up, and I think the best place to go is just my Twitter account at SonOfChelsea, which is kind of the hub of where all my work is going to be. And there's a link to my author page in Football London. So if you want to go and find all my articles, that's the best place to do it. And obviously I share all my pieces there. So, and my YouTube work, my podcast, that's probably the best place, I'd say, easiest place to find all my work and thoughts about Chelsea.
Fantastic. And guys, make sure you go and subscribe to the channel, follow on Twitter as well, SonOfChelsea. The link's just gone in there. Thank you very much, Victor, for that. Appreciate it as always. Jay, bro, let them know where to find you. Let them know about the content that you're providing and obviously the job that you're doing as well, Football London.
Yeah, well, just follow me on Twitter if you want at J_McIntosh. I think if you agree with me, if you have any problems with any of my opinions, message me on my private account at HajirFT. At HajirFT. That's if you have any issues with me, that's my private account. So
I missed the link up, man. Chelsea Social was so funny.
Yeah. So any issues you've got of any of my opinions, send them there. Just follow me on Twitter. You'll see everything. But it's more important. You're close to 20,000, so it's more important everyone's watching. That subscribe, like the video, do what you've got to do, share it in groups, start conversations, and help people that are helping you talk about Chelsea. So yeah, it's good. Thanks for having us.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, man. Listen, I really appreciate it. I'm really striving for that 20K. I know it's going to mean a lot when I get there. It's not too far away now. We're on 17, so definitely subscribe if you can, guys. Smash the likes. Leave comments as well, because I'll be obviously down there replying and talking to you guys about the game. And I look forward to the next bit of content coming out as well. I'm not sure exactly how we're gonna do the roundabout yet. We have to discuss this behind the scenes, but we're gonna release that. If you want to see anything next from me, we'll be on Twitch. I'll be going live for the Monza Grand Prix for the F1. I said I would cover that a lot more for the rest of the season, and obviously the start of next season as well. There's a lot going on there, so make sure to subscribe to the Twitch. That's about it from me, people. I'll see you guys tomorrow for some form of content, and I'll see you on Twitch if you do watch F1. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you next time in a bit, people. Peace. Perfect.